Hi, I'm Lenina Rassool and welcome to Mental Health Matters. Today we're going to be speaking to a counseling psychologist about the difference between normal emotions like grief and sadness versus disorders like depression or major depressive disorder. Now, this has always been a very fascinating topic for me, but also extremely confusing because everybody has sad or bad days. How do we know when we are spinning out or spiraling into a depression and need some extra support or need to reach out for help? Now, when I Googled this, what I found is that a disorder is described as something that interrupts or disrupts your normal functioning. Could be at work, could be at home. But also, I want to say that, everyone's benchmark for normal is very different. So we're using the term normal very loosely. I want to give an example. For myself, what's normal is that after a high workload day, I would sometimes not eat for the whole day and only have my dinner or my first meal when I go to dinner in the evening. But for someone who loves food or has a really healthy appetite, not eating the whole day could be an indicator that something is wrong or the person is not functioning very well. After the break, we are going to be speaking to counseling psychologist Yasmin Masoogie-Gabie about what's the difference between sadness and depression. But before we do that, I'm going to play one of my favorite videos from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group debunking some myths about depression. Let's have a look.
Good day everyone, my name is Zoleka and I'm a senior substance abuse counselor for SADC. Today we're going to be talking about debunking the myths about depression. So many times people will say things that are not true about depression, like get over it, or for us Black or African people they would say it's not our thing, it's a white disease. What are other things that people say? Get over it, you're weak. For men, a lot of men are accused of being weak because of depression. Guys, it's not true. Depression is a serious mental illness and could escalate if it's not properly treated. So it's important that we take people seriously, people that are depressed. We need to encourage them. We need to be of a positive lending hand to them. So when someone says, I feel alone, take the time to find out why do they feel alone? What has been happening in their life? What has been stressing them for them to feel the way that they're feeling? If someone says, I feel like everything is dark, I'm dragging everyone down, nothing is working out, take that 2 minutes to find out what has been happening. It's important to be aware and conscious of your stress levels, because if your stress is not treated or is not recognized, then it can lead to depression.
So that was a short video from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group debunking some myths about depression. I wanted to play that because I wanted to show that, when you're not feeling good or you're going through a depression, normal things like not being able to get out of bed or not eating is not just because you're lazy or you've just had a little bit of a loss of an appetite. It could be an indicator that something is really wrong. Now, after the break, we're going to be speaking to a counseling psychologist, but we are going to take a short break first and we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching Mental Health Matters, and we are speaking about sort of the difference between normal emotions like sadness and grief versus disorders like depression or major depressive disorder. And joining me in studio to speak about this is Yasmin Masoogie-Gabie, who is a counseling psychologist, focuses on trauma and anxiety, and she's also a board member at Lifeline as well as a facilitator at Lifeline. Yasmin, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lenina. Pleasure to be here and happy to share this conversation with everybody.
Great. So to get us started, Yasmin, I did want to ask, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Lifeline, which is a counseling organization. People might not sort of know much about it.
So I'd like to go first to Lifeline. I think that's where my passion is. It's an organization that's been around for over 50 years. It started off with somebody calling to say, I need help, a suicide call, and somebody honoring that call the first time it ever happened. And that, I think, the need was understood. And so it began with that premise. And it's taken, 50 years later, we offer with free. I would like to just add the free counseling to anybody. To anybody, I once had a guy call me for his CV. It's like, I can't do my CV. And I initially thought, well, you've got the wrong place. But then we packed it. He was so anxious about the CV and he didn't know how to get started. And we went to unpack it. And then, there's such a value to talking. Right? You stuck with this loop in your head all the time, and then, and when you talk, you have to land somewhere where somebody's receiving it. So it doesn't benefit. It's good to let go in conversation, but it's also valuable and healing to let go where the conversation is received and it's constructive, in a way that you heard and something can be done about it. So there's a difference between a vent and talking. So people often think when they come for therapy, I've already spoken. I've already said what I've spoken to this, I've spoken to it. So the kind of, I'm spoken out. But what therapy does, it takes whatever you're giving and it holds it and it sort of constructs it in a way and gives it back to you to do something with it. So it's a wonderful modality.
I love that explanation, Yasmin. I mean, especially, I think using the example of someone phoning into the receiver is exactly what I wanted to speak about today.
Wow.
Because when you think about, we sort of think about depression also as a sort of sadness, and we think about it, like when I think about it in my head, someone's laying, they can't do anything. But what you're talking about is an interruption in executive function, not actually being able to do something normal, like writing out your CV. So I think let's start with, I guess if I want to dive in, sadness and depression, just based on that context, how can we how do we define both of them?
I guess it's tricky, right? Because you can't undo the fact that we live in social media and that word is being thrown around.
Yeah.
So even my kids, my 13-year-old will know I'm depressed. So I don't think we can ever sort of decontextualize it any longer because that's the word now associated with a dark mood or a feeling down. So it's going to be there's a clinical definition, right? So I would ask your viewers to Google the DSM-5, where they talk about what is the disorder of depression. So once there's the Google definition, but on a layman's term where you and I, what I call is a random Tuesday. How do you wake up on a random Tuesday when you're just feeling life? You're feeling that, and what associated, everything seems to be okay. You look around, everything is in its place.
Yeah.
But here you are in despair. And what is that? So is that sadness? Is that depression? So when something is impacting your life in a negative way, so it's not taking off a weekend because that's healing. When it's suddenly you find yourself incapable of doing stuff, when I just cannot anymore, I don't feel like showering, I don't feel like getting out of bed for a number of days, for about 2 weeks, then you can look at it and go, this looks like something I need to take a look at. So, and depression and sadness, all what I like to call all frequencies are welcome, right? That's the idea. All frequencies of feeling are meant to be welcome in our body. So if sadness comes in a healed body, you can handle the weight of that sadness because it's a loss of something, right? It could be a pet, it could be your grandparents, it could be grief in a way.
Your phone was stolen.
Or it could be a disappointment, right?
Yeah.
But the way we process that depends on how our nervous system responds. So depression, sadness, I would always ask that you first go to the nervous system. We have a hugely disrupted nervous system. It's impossible for somebody to come and say, oh, you know what, I'm all good because I've had a good life. Because talking in context of South Africa, I was talking to you earlier about, we don't realize we've come out of a war, 30 years out of apartheid has left everybody sort of stranded and figuring out. So we are post-war. How do we recover post-war? We don't want to go too deep into generational trauma, but you cannot escape generational trauma. When it comes to depression and these things, every single person you meet will have some kind of generational hit. You could have been hit like I call it the emotional barometer. You touch it and see how high yours goes, ping, and mine goes like 60%, yours goes 40%. But we all hit, right? And we all manifest depression and sadness and despair in a very specific way. People often think that, their work life is so in order, but when they go home, then suddenly they're angry at home. Who you are is who you are, right? And we have to take a look at wherever you go, we have to look at that. And so what is depression? Depression is, it's a sense of worthlessness, right? It's sort of one, we can tap into one element of depression. Let's look at the self-worth of it. Or perhaps look at something that you'd like to pick up on, something that you feel that's something you see it's just sort of ubiquitous. People suffer from it and you can't help it, but what do we do about it?
Yeah.
That's always, we go to the now what. But before you can go to the now what, and I guess everybody knows that, it's the first acknowledgement of it. I have to know that I'm in trouble. Sad and being overly sad, it's something only you will know. You will know that I'm sitting with something that if you use these words, you won't understand. Just the mere fact that you use that word means that it's a depth there. The fact that nobody will get it means that something is happening inside of you that you cannot share, which means that something is happening, an event is happening in your body. And that needs support. So it doesn't mean that support there's a variety of support out there. And where we're going in life, and it's always like you have to go to a therapist, you must go to a clinical psychologist. That's not necessary, right?
It's not always accessible.
Because healing is really expensive. It's really expensive. If you decide you want to take on your healing route, and then what? If you don't have medical aid, you have to go into the system and you have to wait. So I love the fact that Lifeline exists. So that you pick up a call, you pick up the phone and you go, you know what, I'm just struggling right now. That's all you need to say. Or, you know what color shoes do I have to wear today? There's a black pair, there's a blue pair. Nobody on that call is going to tell you what. Everybody's going to go, tell me more about your shoes. And that year, I wish I could ask people, just explore what it is to have an ear. Call, put down. Call again, put down. Call till you find the courage to say, hello, I need something.
I love that, and I love that you made it sound so simple and so easy, because there's all this weight attached to struggling. There's all this weight attached to struggling, all this weight attached to phoning into a counseling line. But actually, all it is just making sort of that phone call and saying, like, I'm not okay, like I'm struggling with this and that. When you're just coming back to sort of that context of struggling with the CV, right? And I wanted to ask, and so when we don't shower. And I think I've spoken about and I've written about it already that, and it's taken me a long time also because of shame to say, you know what, if I haven't showered for a couple of days, then I know it's more than sadness. I know it's sort of disrupting my normal functioning. And so when we think about, what is that difference of slipping over, spiraling out when it's not normal sadness, not being able to do the CV, it obviously manifests physically in some ways. And so what are some of the ways that you've seen, maybe points? I want to say, what are some of the things? You also mentioned the amount of days. So there's an executive functioning element. It's you're struggling to function in a normal way for a certain amount of time. Is that a good way to sort of start gauging and start figuring?
So I want to be cautious with that, right?
Yeah.
Because somebody could be just on day one.
Yes.
Right? And this is a dark day, and suddenly you go, well, it's not 14 days, so it can't be that. So day one. So there's no, I can't really say there's a gauge. I know that if you go through a clinic's guide, there would be a sort of gauge to say, okay, let's speak through it like systematically. But let's just take all the paperwork and all the red tape out and go, what does it look like, right? When you're in it, right? Because my suspicion for a lot of people is that you've been in it for such a long time. Your acknowledgement is starting on day one. So you're just starting to say, oh, I've watched this episode. Oh, I must be depressed. But you take the acknowledgement as day one. But meantime, you've been sitting with it for years, right? Yeah. So what I want to bring just the conversation a little bit to the nervous system. So in our body, the idea that we all know, generally at school, we taught about the fight, flight, or freeze, right? And then we've got our fear centers. And our fear centers are there to detect threat and there to keep you in survival and to keep you safe. The idea is to keep you safe. But because of the amount of trauma we've been exposed to in South Africa, all around the world, and the amount of generational trauma that's come through us, so you don't actually have to directly witness trauma to be traumatized. So I think that's an important thing to put into context. You don't have to be a direct witness to feel traumatized. So you don't have a story to add to your depression. Well, I don't have that kind of, it wasn't as bad for me as it was for you.
Yeah.
So I can't be that depressed. That is not true. You are carrying something. And what is your responsibility? Your responsibility is to heal. Why? Because when I'm a healed person, I enact healing. I'm spontaneous, I'm happy, and then I make you happy. And I touch you with my bubble of happiness, and you go and you spread your happiness around. It's your responsibility to heal. It's just because that's how you're saving humanity, right? One person at a time. So all you need to do is figure out what's going on. So sorry, come back to the topic of the nervous system. So the moment your body detects any threat, and I'm talking about only you, your threats are unique to you. So your colleague lifting their eyebrow out at you is unique to you. Nobody else has witnessed that. Nobody else has seen that. You are now in threat mode. That means the moment you are threatened, your body will release cortisol or stress hormones. And then you are in fight, flight, or freeze immediately. So I want you to just to have a sit down and think about how your day is. When you wake up, the first thought you wake up is phone, pick up, diarize, right? Immediately when you wake up, you're putting your body in fight or flight because the threat is there. I need to know what's going to happen. So all these little things that you are doing during your day, I want you to just take a pause, and for your listeners also just take a pause and just have a walk through. As you wake up, your eyes go open. What's the first thought? What's the first feeling? You are in threat mode the moment you wake up. That means stress hormones are in your body from what do we call it? From zero, right?
Yeah.
And then what do you need to survive? You need feel-good chemicals. We are, physiologically, we just need chemicals. You need serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, a host of feel-good. The moment you are in threat mode, it starts Pac-manning your chemicals. So now you're going, your serotonin is all good, you're happy. You invite that stress in. You activate cortisol. Boom, Pac-man all your serotonin, feeling depleted. Now you have to deal with a stressful situation.
Early in the morning already. So you're starting out that way.
So think about parents with their kids.
Yeah.
What's the rush? You have to get up for work. I need to get to work. I need to get you ready. Boom, boom, screaming, shouting, getting the kids. Everybody, from you to your children, sitting with cortisol. Get to your class. Now the kids must manage themselves in class. Sitting in stress because they need to fit in. I mean, I call the schoolyard the war zone, right? We're sending our kids out to war.
Yeah.
Right? And then they have to manage the teacher's expectation and emotions. So can you imagine the type of stress we're sitting with? So that is just to acknowledge, take a moment and acknowledge, sure, look what I've been doing to myself all along. And then we bring this whole stigma of depression and such big words. Let's just take a back step.
So if we look at it that way, and I mean, again, I'm loving sort of the description, but that stress, some of these stresses are part of life. It's not like we can sort of remove ourselves completely from it. But you were saying earlier when you said how a healed person responds to sadness, and again, possibly how a healed person responds to these kind of stresses is different to when you're in a state of not being able to manage it.
Yeah, and then let me retract also a healed person. I don't think I've ever met a healed person.
Right? Not completely. So, that's the point.
So yeah, let me just retract the healed, right? But in context,
but a functioning
person that's on. That's what I would say, that has a rested nervous system.
Okay.
Not a healed person, a person that has a rested nervous system will be able to take on life stresses with the idea of with connection.
Yeah.
Right. You cannot avoid the pain of life. That's not what we're aiming for. You're not aiming for things will, there's a song, it says things will blindside you at on a Tuesday, 4 a.m. in the morning, right?
Yeah.
That's life. It's not going to be a planned thing where it's a weekend where you prepared for it. So these kind of events are always blindsided events. And so what is the response? So a nervous system, and I would like everybody to go and look up what a rested nervous system is. Look up polyvagal theory, look up a nervous system, look up these words to get an idea of what we're talking about. Physiologically, if you get that under control, you have won half your battle. So you asked me like, what can we do? We can't avoid it. So what does a rested nervous system look like? Or how do we get to a rested nervous system? It's because once it's disrupted, that leads to depression. A disrupted nervous system leads to excessive sadness, excessive grief, excessive things. So we are looking at excessive, and you are unique. You know your excesses. The struggle isn't actually with acknowledging the depression. It's actually the now. What do I do with it? I can't ask for help. So you shut down. So you don't. And in our communities, the resources are not available in that sense, right? It's not it's so stigmatized that it become like, even if I put a bigger golden palace up there with, you know, a plaque saying free or whatever, people will be so resistant because of the stigma of what does mental illness mean? What does depression mean? If I enter that, everyone's going to know I'm mad.
Yeah.
And what I want to, I don't know how to throw in it, like the idea is of allowing people to rest in the fact that asking for help is, it feels so good, you know. It's a beautiful thing to be able to get, and not help. Let's take away the word help even. Let's get support. Just the word support. Like, I'm having a rough day. What does support look like in my day? And you know what? People don't even know. You don't even know what you need. If you were to say to me, Yasmin, you know what? I'm having a rough day. I'd be like, no, what do you need? You'll give me a beautiful blank stare.
That is
right?
one of my worst questions
know,
ever,
right?
because I do struggle to know exactly.
Because how would you know? Because that level of care wasn't afforded to you when you did need it. So you can't imagine that care could be there today, because it's almost like learned. You learned how to take care of yourself, but in the absence of the care, that's how you learn to hold yourself up. So you can't imagine that anybody would be able to give you that, because you've been doing it for yourself all your life. So why ask somebody else? You've been taking care of you all this time. How would anybody know how to take care of you? So why would you ask for help? Only you know you. And that is what's the good word? Not a mistake. I wish I had a better word than mistake. That is, you are not right. You're wrong.
Yeah, that's
the
misconception.
misconception. Okay, that's a good word. That's a misconception. It's what help looks like is somebody on the other side that's also just been there. Like, I go, shock, what a rough ride. And you go, yeah. It's a kind of giggle on the way to go, that was terrible. Have you ever had a rough day and you had it with somebody? A rough day with somebody. There's a sense of camaraderie that happens that only you two know what that day felt like. And when you go there, that level of support, you don't feel that lonely on that day, because you had support.
It's also like if you want to do something difficult. So for me, it's like, oh, I really will try to get someone to do it with me. I mean, even just like renewing my car license.
Right. And you want to know, right? That is support. But the shame in saying, you're not going to,
somebody to go with
please,
me.
Can you come with me? Because why? You go back into your child so quickly, right? Because when you were that age, you couldn't ask for help. There was nobody around and you knew you couldn't. So you going now to ask is the same feeling of saying, I would like you to help me, but the adults around us will also, you know, and I don't want to shame our past generation, right? The one above us or the previous ones, because they had no level of resources, right? I want us in this generation right now to take the blessings of where we're at. We just click on the phone. You've got YouTube videos that will describe, it will offer you so much resources into managing your day.
Yeah, exactly, Yasmin. I'm enjoying this so much, but we have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching Mental Health Matters. We are speaking about the sadness and depression and the difference between the two. And joining us is Yasmin Masoogie-Gabie, who is a, what do you say? Trauma and anxiety counselor, who is helping to explain all of this. And I mean, Yasmin, I'm enjoying the conversation so far. Just the way that you're contextualizing a lot of these things, the way you're talking about emotional dysregulation and sort of how the chemicals affect us. And I think it's so important because, you know, one of the things about mental health is that it's invisible. It's not tangible. Like, you hurt your leg or your arm, I think I was saying last week, and you put it in a cast and you can see someone's like, you know, got a disorder or their functioning is disrupted by this very physical thing. And yet with mental health, I think it's difficult to speak about because it's invisible, and we have to sort of almost imagine. We almost can't imagine that you can't get out of bed. I keep thinking, I was somebody at one point who couldn't get out of bed. And I had to go, I went to my GP, and my GP, I'll never forget, he said to me, okay, well, that's not normal. But still, you know, I will, when I think about it and I want to tell people about it, I have this ping in the back of my head saying, like, how can someone just not be able to get out of bed? Like, physically, you are able to, you got out of bed to go to the doctor. So, so I love that you're sort of bringing in all of that. But what I want to ask you though is that we had all of this conversation about what depression is: excessive sadness, excessive grief, not being able to sort of uh, get yourself out of it, being able to recognize all of that. But we live in a society that doesn't even really accept sadness. And I think there's a lot of narrative about women who are being told to smile, but all children are being told to smile. And we grew up also, when you say not to shame the previous generation, but I'll give you stop
Something to
crying,
cry.
or I'll give you something to cry about. Turn that frown upside down. Put a smile on your face, etc. So it's like this chronic smiling sort of society. Do you think that that's part of like what makes it so difficult for us to be able to talk about difficult feelings?
And I think also before, right, there wasn't a lot of research done on depression. So all they could do was, I think I'm depressed because it's a feeling up here in my mind, right? But that's not true any longer. Depression is a physical feeling. So now you can go and have it checked out. Because just think about it. Just take a minute and think about your anxiety for a second. Where are you feeling it? You're not feeling it up here. You're feeling it in your solar plexus. You're feeling it up here by your sternum. It's creating a physical feeling. So that physical feeling is creating a blockage in your system. Sit with that enough. You find, so I will invite all your listeners to take a minute and have a look at where is the pain in your body right now. Any pain. Is it in your jaw, the back of your neck? Is it on your shoulders, your fingers, your toes? Where is it? That's the accumulation of that anxiety that's pooling somewhere. There isn't a flow in your body. That is a physiological manifestation of depression. That's not in your mind. That is in your body. So you might say, oh, but it's just a shoulder pain. But have a look at the shoulder pain. It is not just from carrying a heavy bag. It is something of a weight that you're carrying. So where is it? How is it manifesting in your body? That's the simplest way of looking at it. So no longer is depression a thing of a mind thing, like, oh, I think I'm depressed. I feel like, and we don't have to take away the word depression. I feel this butterflies right here because I'm on TV right now. So it's sitting right here. Now sit with it. If I have to sit with this the whole day, just think about me sitting with this butterflies all day. What's going to happen? It's going to create tension because I'm going to sit in a specific way. And then I'm going to go in and in. So now have a look at children. Just have a look at kids. They come from a home that hasn't understood nervous systems. So just hear the barking all day. Just hear barking, barking, barking. That's what children hear when they're fighting. Barking, 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 barking. And they need to regulate. Then you send them out to school to sit at a desk for 40 minutes at a time. Then they have to deal with another repressed nervous system, which is their teacher. So just think on that for a second. What's happening to their little bodies? That's a child. What's happening to you that's come from that? You are that little girl that had to sit through school, through your parents, through your teachers, with that feeling. How has it manifested itself? So do not ever think that this is a thing of your mind. It's in your body. It's the core. Any manifestation, the way you sit, have a look at it. You will find that releasing that will be not a big challenge, because once you acknowledge, there'll be work, but it's a challenge. It's a challenge because this is how you've walked your whole life. So I just wanted to destigmatize the idea that depression is a mind thing. It's in your body. So have a look at your bodies today. Go have a look at your headaches, your dry mouth, your anemia, your cancer, your everything. And this is not a mind thing. Depression or sadness or disrupted nervous system is a very physiological thing. And are you going to be ashamed now going to a doctor? It's so easy to go, I've got cancer. Not I've been traumatized my whole life and I've accumulated all this and now I have cancer. It's I have cancer, can you help me? So the whole point is to take 10 steps back and go, this is where the holistic healing needs to come in. That the doctor, the therapist, whoever's dealing with you needs to take 5 steps back and look and go, tell me about what happened. How did you get here? Did you get to this end point where your body's now reacting? It's had enough. It is now taking on its own intelligence to make sure you do something about it now. And that's the manifestation of trauma.
Wow. I mean, this is huge. I want to just come back to what you said about release. And I listened to an interview you did at another point before this conversation. and you were speaking about how emotions are energy and that it needs to be released, and it is released in some ways through our behavior. So that could be whether you are you cry is an easy one, or if you're repressing it and you're being passive aggressive, it's still being released through that sort of passive aggressive or an angry outburst. So these emotions need to come out, and I want to speak about it because it was something I hadn't realized. So one day I was speaking to a therapist, and she said something about, and it wasn't a session, it was just sort of in conversation. But she said something about release and restoration. And I sat there and I thought, when you're speaking about when you're kids and you're speaking about when parents are arguing, and I think about when I was young, it was interesting that these things would happen, these events would happen, these negative events, but there was never any context. As kids, we weren't allowed to speak about it. And I always used to wonder, how did I, as a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, get up on Monday and go to school as if nothing happened? I can't imagine it now. So the notion of release and restoration as a woman in her late 30s was completely new to me. What do you mean by that?
And I guess it is a new concept, right? Because as the research is coming along, we're realizing that the stored emotion is whatever you've ever experienced in your life will be remembered and stored. So I'm talking about the little dust on the floor here will be remembered. But your body and your brain can't accumulate all that knowledge, it will combust. So it needs to take important information, it needs to, and sort of release all that in order to go forward. That is why at 7, you had whatever you needed to get up on a Monday. It's a level of intelligence, right? That and I think this computer that we have, I don't think we acknowledge how intelligent it is, and the gratefulness that we have to sit when we do get to restoration. But the idea that our cells hold everything. So you take a little. I like looking at animation because when they do the water droplets, it's so perfectly circular, right? So just take a glass of water and put one black drop in it. That's a cell that's been now infected by some kind of trauma, right? So there's a little and a little. So the idea is, how do we flush out that trauma? So that would be the release. And that is the walk. So for me, my idea of healing is healing must be fun. It's only painful from the point of you acknowledging it or you sitting in it to the point that you ask for help or you ask for support. So once you come for support and we go, yes, are you on board? Because it's fun. Because once you start recognizing that this wasn't your fault, nothing was your fault, you can start releasing the baggage that you've been carrying that you have identified whoever you were taking care of. And that is always the idea of generational trauma, is that somehow the child became the parent inadvertently. So there's the little black globule that's put into the clear water. How do we rinse that out? So there's thousands of modalities. The modality that I like to use, and I like to, is the understanding of the nervous system. Once you understand physiologically what's actually happening to you, you'll be able to conquer the world.
And that's almost like what I was saying earlier. That's now, we're making it tangible. Right. It's not just like this thing that's in your head.
It's a mind thing, right? Exactly. What do you do with what's in your mind? How do you take something in your mind, a construct that is too abstract? So how do you take it? And now, thank God, the research has shown that it's a physiological thing. And now the shame can be let go of, right? The release. The shame gets released, guilt gets released. The fact that you were not responsible for your trauma. Because even though you know it intellectually, you know that something was done to you. But when you respond to it, it's as if you were responsible for it. And that's the idea of the healing needs to begin. That it's and there's a song I listen to by Imagine Dragons. It's okay to not be okay. And I sing it all the time because I think we all need to sing. I think that should be a song that just being put up in all the hallways and things. It's okay to not be okay. It's really okay. You're not having a good day. That's okay. Tell me about it. Because yesterday, I wasn't having a good day. Instead of holding, because as kids, if we showed anything, somehow it was shamed, chastised, or the abuse began in that fall. So what we have to destigmatize, just take away the shame, take away the idea. It's almost like coming to therapy isn't the work. It's getting you to come for therapy, getting you to ask for help. That is where the work needs. How do I get you, hold you by your arm and go, it's okay. Just there are people out there that experience very similar things. And when you understand there's a union in that, then suddenly you go, but was it really that bad? Or maybe it was that bad.
Yeah.
You start acknowledging it. So the release is more, I think, the ownership of that it's not okay to be okay. Once you recognize that, oh, it's okay to feel this way, suddenly you're not so ashamed. Suddenly you're not putting on your jacket perfectly. Suddenly, you don't care that your shoes don't match or your socks. Suddenly you just let it go. Something gets let go of.
Yeah.
And that's the release, right? And the release is, trauma is unique, where you experience life is unique, and the way you experience the release will be unique. So I call it like a tick. It's so subtle when you have a shift. It's such a subtle thing. You'll be sitting with me exactly in the same way, but in your universe, everything has changed. Everything has shifted. But to me, exactly like if you have to, and you can't explain to me your shift.
Yeah.
What are you going to say? I feel lighter.
But that's an interesting point to note, because also, when you are, the thing about depression is also that it's invisible in terms of how sometimes we don't realize we're depressed because we don't look any different, or we still, this is the narrative around it. I seem fine. I see, during October and it's Mental Health Month, and we're looking at the posts on Facebook, and oftentimes people who are sort of making a disclosure, talking about the fact that they have depression, it's always sort of preceded by, I know I look fine, or I don't show this to the world. That makes it also quite deceptive, right? For other people, but also for yourself. When we talk about high-functioning depression, you are still getting things done, but you're doing it, and I know with me, I'm doing it sort of in high-stress mode until I crack. And I will say, a lot of people that I speak to, I find it very interesting, and especially with women. I'm not saying only women, but in my conversations with women, we only allow ourselves to take a break once we have cracked. There needs to be something tangible going wrong, something big going wrong, before we will admit that I'm not doing okay enough to take a break or something. Is this?
No, I think all of us, and I know we always talk about women but it's the exact same thing, men and women, right? How we hold ourselves up. Well, how do you hold that pole up, and how do we dress it so it doesn't look like it's falling apart?
Because and can I ask you a question? And do you find, because you work with clients, I'm just thinking now, so is this a way we also deceive ourselves? So we're walking around and no one can see it, and it's a bit of a twilight zone because we know there's something wrong. We don't feel okay, but clearly no one can see it.
Sure, but what does it boil down to? Weakness, right? The whole concept of weak, that once you break, you yourself feel weak. You feel vulnerable and you feel weak. So how do you tell a male that you need to explore this feeling? Because once you explore the feeling, it's going to take that straight pole and shake it up a bit, and you are going to feel weak.
Yeah.
Because weak it's such that word in itself is what you go to. It's a weakness in your body. That's the vulnerability. So yourself as a high-functioning person, what would it look like if somebody met you in your dysfunction? You would feel weak. You'd feel exposed. And if you haven't accepted it, you'll be totally like covered up. I need to hide the shame of, and then ask yourselves, what do you do when you go to a supermarket and you don't look good, and you see somebody that perhaps you haven't seen for a while, or that's looking like they've got it together? What happens? The level of shame, because you are now in your weakest moment, you're most vulnerable. So I use the word weak because that is what is the word associated, but it's not. I think the idea of words are so important. People think it's just a joke, we can't use it, let's just use it, but we need to start changing the narrative, even if it's sounding so pedantic, right? We're so pedantic about things. But in order to change the narrative, you have to change the word. So taking the word weak and saying vulnerable, taking the word, words won't come to me right now because I'm TV, but the idea of the word is an energy.
Yeah.
Right? It's a thought, it's a word, and you take that energy and you put it on somebody else as well. So coming back to the idea of being exposed, when you're in your vulnerability, you have to be taught how to hold yourself in vulnerability. It's not something you're just gonna, it's not divine. It's not you're gonna sit there one day and you're gonna sit there and one day you're just gonna get this information and then suddenly you're gonna hold vulnerability. It's a skill. Nobody's been taught this. None of us got the manual. So all you need, and that is why help and support is essential, because you will be given these tools to say, this is what vulnerability looks like. It's not a weakness, it's a vulnerability. These are the words we use. This is how you talk to yourself. This is what self-love looks like. And that is the scariest thing. If you say self-love, people go, everyone thinks they know it.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks they know, okay, you know what, I'm going to go to the hairdresser, I'm going to do my nails. But filling your own cup is one of the most traumatizing things to start off with. It is hard. It is debilitating. It feels like your life is being ripped open. And there's so many memes that go, you know, healing looks like this, like you scattered and, you know, it's dark. Healing is dark at the beginning. It's dark at the beginning because you are so afraid of that support. And then, boom, it's beautiful, it's enlightening, it's spontaneous, it's release. And it's magical. Picture a dove out of a cage.
I mean, I love all of the things that you're saying, and also the fact that just acknowledging always want to that, you know, doing the work of the healing is not just the movies often to show sort of a instant turnover. Yes, an instant turnover, but actually, you know, doing the hard things means, and what I was thinking of when you were speaking was like, it's facing the hard things we've been suppressing. To do a presentation that you're really afraid of, for instance, or go and speak on a public platform if it, you know, if you're extremely paranoid about it and you still do it, you have to feel those feelings and then sort of push through. And
you're
sort of the
talking
same
big
thing.
things, right? We're talking about family lunches.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we're talking about meeting your sibling, meeting your cousins, the normal lay people. It's never going to be about the big things.
Yeah.
It's always the little things. Seeing your father Sunday nights, you know, going to do family time, going to sit with your siblings, going to look after your siblings, looking after your cousins, looking after that one person that nobody sees. You see it, but you know they're in a dark alley.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do, but all you can do is just be, right?
Yeah.
So those are not even, it seems so insignificant, but those are the big things. The big presentations, the big standing up, that's normal stress. That's the stress you look forward to. That's the stress to go, I'm going on TV and I'm very nervous.
Yeah.
You were meant to be that kind of stress. So the little, sitting with your dad is not meant to be stressful.
Yeah.
It's meant to be loving. Sitting with your siblings is meant to be connection. So if in that there's a disruption coming up, that's what we need to take a look at. The CVs and the big things and going to work, those are the normal stresses. That's the life stress. So we need to start at the base. And the base is the first two attachments at your parents and the next two your siblings. And you know what we come with blended families. Those are things we need to look at.
Yeah, that's big and that's huge and that's great.
And
so
that's like,
thinking about the big things as normal stresses and looking at the sort of little stresses where they actually shouldn't be is really a great way for us to play out this segment, because we have to take another break. But we will be back with more when we come back. Welcome back. You're still watching Mental Health Matters, and we have been in conversation and in studio with Yasmin Masoogie-Gabie. Yasmin, sorry about that. But you know, there's just so much going on in my head right now, and so we have been, you know, chatting about all of these things. We're talking about normal sadness, normal stresses versus excessive sort of sadness and grief that could lead into depression. Looking at you know, looking at your abnormal stresses, which are actually not on the big level, because that's where we're supposed to be stressed, new jobs, etc. But rather bringing it down and looking at what's stressing us out that shouldn't be stressing us out. So we've had this great conversation. I want to ask you, just as we move out into the last segment, what are ways to sort of, you've identified that you have these, that you're feeling excessive sadness, excessive grief, that this is not normal. And I want to say again, I use the word normal loosely because everyone's got a different like normal. But whatever's going on inside you is overwhelming, and you don't feel like you're coping. One of the things obviously is to phone Lifeline. Lifeline is available to pick up and phone. There are a couple of organizations that offer telephone
Yes.
counseling. And what I like about the telephone counseling is that it's also sort of, it can be anonymous.
It's
You know,
anonymous.
you don't have to do it in the house. You can do it from your car or from the corner.
And we've had people call us at work under their desks.
Oh wow!
You know, in the toilet.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. You just hear the whisper, quick, quick, quick. And it never needs to be a whole session, right? It doesn't have to be an intense. It could be 5 minutes. It could be like 10 minutes. It could be an hour. It could be as much time as you need, right? But somebody's there that you don't have to worry about who is this person, what are they going to think of me. They're just there to receive and listen. Because just understand, you've never spoken before, you have and it hasn't. Once it gets released from here, you're also hearing it. And when you hear it, something shifts in you also. So when you talk, you're also listening to yourself. Because you're also programming, is this the right thing to say? Maybe, perhaps not. So you're also structuring it in your mind. So when you talk, you are listening. And then something shifts in you, because when you hear it for your first time also, you can say the same thing over and over, but you will hear it for the first time. And when you hear it, a ding will go off and you go, oh, that's what talking does. Talking just takes it out, puts it out there, hands it over to somebody and goes, oh. So we wait for the ding. And sometimes the ding doesn't happen, you know, and let's talk about the fact that not all therapists work, right? You know, I joke and I say it's like speed dating.
Oh, I also say that.
Right. So it's because you just need to find your right fit. And sometimes that takes a lot. Sometimes it takes that kind of, you just have to find somebody that meets your energy, that somebody, and just in that, right? Because what we do, we hand over our power to people. They're the authority. So you come to a therapist and you have all the answers. But not every therapist will receive you. The moment you sit down, you just need to feel received. You feel like, oh, I can be heard here. It's a safety thing. If I say it, I'm not going to be judged. So what people go to therapists is because they're the expert. So you don't really share in a constructive way. You share it in a textbook way to say, you know, hey, this happened, be this. So it becomes, and I have people go, well, I've been for therapy. I've been for 2 sessions. I've been for 3 sessions.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's like, oh, I told the therapist what I needed to say. But that doesn't work. It's a kind of taking your little safety box and handing it over to the very first person that's going to open it for the first time and have a look at that. Just the idea of that is scary. So knowing that you're going to walk in that. So the therapist is a speed dating thing. You need to figure it out. You need to feel rested. That is the thing I talk about therapy. And there are thousands of modalities out there, right? There are thousands of modalities that once you honor your calling, once you honor that calling to say, I'm going to go and get some support for this feeling. So I've got little butterflies here. And just because I've got butterflies here, I'm going to ask somebody for support. Lifeline. And from Lifeline, perhaps they could refer you to whoever you need. Yeah. So there will be that avenue, perhaps, where can I go to? That could be also what you call Lifeline for. But because we understand that trauma is now held in the body, and all we need to do is inject chemicals, right? So there's the physiological thing. Serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine. I think you can, you'll get your views. It'll come and tell you all the chemicals, right? So the idea is just to understand, how do you inject chemicals? That is, if you could just have that narrative, how do I inject good chemicals? So today, okay, fine, I've got anxiety, my serotonin is depleted. What do I do today?
Yeah.
So it's sunlight. Sitting a minute in the sun, putting a hot water bottle on your lap, warmth somehow calibrates your nervous system. So you put the hot water bottle, you just put your hands on it, run your hands under hot water. That warmth, it's a feeling of nurture. It's an Epsom salt bath. I will say to everybody, just go to the internet, Google it. Epsom salt, what the benefits of that magnesium does. It replenishes the minerals, because when you are stressed, you will release all this feel good. All the minerals gets depleted. And there comes back the physiology of depletion, right? All these things are getting depleted, but you're calling it a mind thing. It is a deeply physiological thing. So those are the things that you can do. I don't like to preach too much on meditation and that, because I feel like it's taken so out of context.
Like you
Yeah.
must meditate. And I also find, even when people say exercise, and I know movement, I had a
Right.
GP, I had a wonderful GP actually write me a prescription to just walk
Mm.
without earphones in, with not to get fit. She said, just go and walk and just make sure you're moving the body.
Right.
And that's all. Not for anything else. I said, I'm keeping this prescription. I'll put it in my book one day.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much. I mean, those are really great things. We are out of time.
Okay, good.
So unfortunately, we can't go any further, but I just want to thank you so much. I want to thank you for making this conversation so practical. I'm absolutely loving just learning about how warmth can calibrate the nervous system, and also, you know, the Epsom salt bath in terms of magnesium, and giving us something to actually go and Google and look at. I know for me, one of the things that sort of, when I spiral, I start to think about, it's a place for me to start, as opposed to just getting my head together or just whatever. I often think, just eat. And not eat because, you know, people are telling me I need to eat. Eat because maybe my system's dysregulated and I be hungry. And actually it's hunger, and the hunger is making the sadness feel worse. And so, you know, we're spiraling. But that is, I think, a conversation that we need to carry on for another day, and look at all of the ways, these physical ways, little things, the little tiny things that we can do to start making us feel better in little increments. Okay, so Yasmin, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Lenina.
And we have come to the end of our hour together. I want to thank you all for joining, myself and Yasmin, having this wonderful conversation. That's the end of Mental Health Matters for today. I will see you next week. Goodbye.